I'm standing with the great living artist, photographer, Catherine Opie, in her major retrospective at the Guggenheim Museum.
This was a body of work that I did, which was in some ways the first body of work in which I decided to really talk about identity politics in relationship to my own personal life. And it's a series called Being and Having. Here you can see here that Whitey did an extra scissors job to the mustache to make it very unique. So everybody kind of like doned it, and then with it they put their nicknames. So this is Whitey and Chief, and I'm Bo, and you have Jay and Chicken and Oh So Bad and Pigpen and Papa Bear and Jake. So that it really begins to talk about ideas of masculinity and butchness. And the friends that I had in Los Angeles were more like San Francisco dykes, and that's the community that I came out of, than the LA like lipstick lesbian. And we would do this. We would actually put on our mustaches and ride our motorcycles over to Palms, the only 7-day-a-week lesbian bar in LA, and we'd sit out on our motorcycles and we'd be like, the girls would come out and they'd be all like with the big hair and the lipstick. And we'd be like, hey man, you want to go for a ride with us? And they'd look at us like we were just like the biggest freaks in the world. And we never really got anybody to go for a ride with us, but we had a really good time doing it. So this body of work wasn't as playful or as kitschy or campy as Being and Having, because it was really truly trying to make documents of portraits of friends at this time period, in which I felt the validity of making images in relationship to the SM leather community was incredibly important. And then I wanted to play with certain ideas in art history, and one of my favorite painters is Hans Holbein. So it was like using these kind of brilliant colors then to pop it out so that you could begin to kind of conceptualize it in a different way than how we actually begin to define ideas of documentary photography. My friend Steak tattooed Dyke on the back of her neck, and I just thought it was such a bold move. And I think this was done in '92, and I was using more of a fabric background that we associate with that kind of historical painting and like Holbein. And so then after Dyke in 1993, I made my first self-portrait, which is self-portrait cutting. I think that Holbein was an incredibly realistic painter of that time period. He was more interested in details more than any other painter. That was so specific, and it was within those details that he began to define, a historical time in relationship to Henry VIII's court. You go through the galleries of the really religious iconography, and you realize that a lot of religion in relationship to idea of history was done because there were artists making that and being commissioned from it. And I think it's just as interesting that I have this ability at this moment to kind of hold 4 floors of the Guggenheim, which then again creates that important voice in relationship to history and ideas of identity.
Have dykes been elevated?
Well, I don't know if they've been
yet.
I don't know if they've been elevated or not. Oliver, my son, who's 6, obviously he knows this work very well because he doesn't live with it. We don't have actually any of my pieces hanging in the house. But he's been to my openings. He's been to, the events that surround my life. And it's always amazing because I watch parents with children in these galleries and how they kind of try to rush them past this room, but they actually identify with this in a much more interesting and elaborate way than we actually think of them perceiving this. So yeah, I made this, and I feel like it begins to kind of almost be the ending of a sentence to the first self-portrait, that the trilogy has been kind of created in a certain way.
Baby Dyke.
Well, not Dyke so much as the...
And then breaks her heart, and then as a child.
Creator of the L Word, with her...
My former boss.
with her former partner.
Right.
Miggy.
And they're twins.
And they're twin girls who Miggy gave birth a day after this portrait was taken of them. And this is before Eileen had even started working on the L Word, so it's 1995. And she actually threw the first party for me after my opening at Regan Projects when the portraits were first shown in a contemporary art gallery. It's a very serene image, and it's also a very Hollywood image.
Yeah,
and one of the things about the domestic series that I wanted to do and why I bought an RV and traveled across the country for 3 months, I wanted it to be more about ideas of Americana and American culture. I've never been censored.
You've seen that. You've never been protested?
I've never been protested. I've never been censored. And I think that it's because of the commonality of language that I really use in my work. This work wouldn't be made without Ron and what Ron does, and it's really a tribute to him and his performances. And I just mirrored my aesthetics with him.
How much of a dialogue do you feel with Robert Mapplethorpe?
Oh, that one definitely. That one was made specifically because of Robert's self-portrait with So this just ends up being this kind of quiet place of contemplation and longing and waiting and all of these different feelings that this work could possibly evoke, which evokes for me. It's the room that's the hardest to say goodbye to. Yeah, I don't think it'll ever happen like this anywhere else. You have 14 slots up here with 14 photographs.
That was random.
Yeah, even though it is about that, and photography is definitely about that idea of the decisive moment, there's things that go beyond the decisive moment because it lives beyond the decisive moment.